Hello everyone. In this video we're going to talk about lists and how important they are. I first want to lead with saying that lists are probably the data type that I use the most when I program in Python, and that is because they are amazing. One analogy that's used to describe lists is like a generalized linked list. You can add at the beginning, you can add at the end, and you can add at the middle. You can also take off items off a list at the beginning, the end, or the middle, if you please. But unlike linked lists that you've probably used in C and C++, lists in Python are a little bit different. It's quite an upgrade. Lists in Python can contain a combination of different data types. And not only lists can contain different data types, it can also contain itself. So first let's start by creating an empty list. And in Python, we have two ways of creating an empty list. So I'll start by calling this very cleverly empty list. And you can do that with the list keyword. Using this, you can also cast items that are not a list into a list. We can also create, well, here's the other form of creating an empty list. And we'll very cleverly call this another empty list. And we'll just use two square brackets. Right, so, okay, so here's how we create two empty lists. Big deal. You'll see this in the wild, and people do various operations on them. So, what happens if I want to create a list with content? Well, yeah, let's do that. Also, I'll call this list random things, and I'll provide numbers of different data types. I'll say 5, and let's say volts. We'll also do, I don't know, 8.72. How about that? And we'll create another list. So I'll say with two strings inside, another list. It's quite clever. So while you as a programmer might be acquainted with creating arrays or any sort of data type this way, a more Python way of describing this list would be to actually do something like this. So you will see this out in the wild as well. And whoa. Okay, that's weird. You will see something that looks a little bit more like this, and there's nothing wrong with that. Especially you'll see these much bigger lists done like that. But for this case, we're going to keep it simple, and I'm not going to worry too much about formatting. However, you as a programmer should see that this is one way that you will possibly see lists created, and it's more of a Pythonic way, as the jargon goes, a more Python way of creating a list. So what can we do with lists? Well, we can print them. Let's print random things because it's the only thing that has data. And another thing that I'll say is that the length function works on lists exactly as it does for strings. So I'll print random things, right? But the idea when I print random things is that it's going to get the first layer of content, meaning 1, 2, 3, 4. It doesn't know that the fourth item, the last item, which is a list, has more content in it, right? It can't assume that. It doesn't assume that. So while we see 5 things in here, when we call the length function, we're only going to see 4. So we have our list here, and we have 4 items, right? But in reality, we have a list within a list which contains more data. That's something to consider. One thing that also applies to lists, which is quite convenient, is list slicing. So I'll say numbers. I'll spell it right. Numbers. And let's keep it simple. I'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Okay, 1 through 8. Not too bad. So how we go about slicing lists is exactly the same methodology as that we use for slicing strings. So if I want to get the odd numbers, and I'll call that odds, I will slice the numbers list by starting at the beginning, which will include the 1, going up until the end, and I want to skip every other one. And this is how I'll do it. If I wanted to get the even numbers, well, what I could do here is I can say numbers, and since I want to start with the even numbers, I want to start at index 1, which is the value 2, and I want to go to the end of the string, and I want to skip 2 as well. So why don't we print those values out? We'll print odds, and in a separate print statement, we'll print evens. And what is the result? Okay, not too bad. It's exactly what we expected. So let's say I want to get a little bit more ambitious. I want to have the reverse odds. Okay, so I want to grab this from my numbers list. So what I'll do is that I'll start from the second to last index, right? And this is inclusive. So we'll start at index 7. And because I'm starting from negative, here it gets a little bit tricky. I'll actually go to the end, right? But I don't want to go forward. I want to go back. So since I want to go back, I'm going to do a step of -2. So instead of going forward as we would with a step of 1 or a step of 2, I'm going to go back 1, 2, 1, 2. So this will get 7, 5, 3, 1 in that order. So the reverse odds. And, well, for the reverse evens, I'll get a little bit more lazy, and I'll say, well, I won't make a mistake. This needs to be numbers. But for the reverse evens, you know what? I'm going to be lazy, and I'm going to say evens. I'm going to start from go through the entire list, and I'm going to go backwards with the step of 1. So why don't we print these values? So I'll say print the reverse of odds and print the reverse of evens. So what does that give us? Hey, it gets us everything backwards, right? So there are 2 ways of going backwards on a list, and right here I show it. So what happens if I want to add data to the end? Well, if we were using a vector in C++, we'd use a function called pushback. Well, in Python, lists have a similar method. Let's say, you know what, I want to add to the number 10 to evens. So I'll call a method called append. So I'll append the number 10 to my evens list. And you know what? With odds, I think we need to even out the odds. Haha. And I'll append the number 11 to it. So why don't we print odds and evens again, just to see what their contents are. Look at that. So we have odds and we have our evens, which isn't too bad, not at all. Thank you for watching this video, and in the next video what we're going to cover is another way of adding data to a list. Thank you.